Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got a fantastic guest. This is somebody I truly admire, somebody that I've looked up to for a really long time, that I've known my whole life. He is a local law enforcement legend. He's not the only local law enforcement legend in his family. His brothers are heroes of mine, too, who served our community very well and protected us for many years. His mom's one of the sweetest ladies in the world. His wife is like a sister to me. And his father was one of the most legendary mayors in Ponchatoula history. Everybody knows the Gideon family, and that means that we like today's guest, Chris Gideon. So, Chris, with no further ado, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Parker. Thanks for having me.
And first, I want to thank you, Chris. You're probably my most patient guest yet, because for about the last 7 or 8 minutes, Chris and I have been chatting away, not realizing, folks, that we weren't live with you, our audience. So to our audience, I want to thank you. And, we're going to start here with a quote. Corey James comes on here and says, Chris Gideon, the legend. What's up, brother? So I told you he was a legend. Corey, thanks for confirming that, and thanks for chiming in with this comment. Folks, if you are watching today's show live, know that we have the opportunity to share your quote right here up on screen. So feel free to comment below, and I'll do my best throughout the show to bring those comments up here. But so Chris, you're a guy who knows Ponchatoula as well as anybody. You've been incredibly successful throughout your career, and so are so many other members of your family. Why don't we just kick it off with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, Parker, like you, I was blessed to with the best mother and father anybody could ever wish for. And,
amen.
Not many people get that lucky and blessed, and I happen to be one of those people. And
it's like hitting the lottery. I've often
is.
said on this show and elsewhere, any faults I have are my own, and I thank my lucky stars that Eddie and Celeste Layrisson are my parents, and they raised us and did it right. And your parents, man, Doc Gideon and sweet Miss Alice, boy, you're right. Two of the best. Why don't you tell us, let's start with your mom. Tell us about her, because she's such a sweetheart. And I know she, like my dad, she's, you're not supposed to say a lady's age, but let's just say she's, on a multiple 39th birthday. We just love seeing her, and it's so good to see her still around because she's kind of an icon in the community. What was it like growing up with Alice Gideon as your mom?
All smiles. I mean, I guess there was times absolutely when I tested her patience to the end as a young boy, and rightfully so. But my mom was Miss Amy High when she was in high school, and always a smile. That's all I remember about her, is how kind, how sweet, how she always had a lunch and dinner prepared for me and my brothers and sisters, and anybody off the street, whether it be our friends or anybody, even people she didn't know.
Right.
There was always enough to feed whoever showed up. And that was the case throughout, our lives. I mean, she wasn't just a stay-at-home mom or wife. She managed my dad's chiropractic clinic, and they were never apart.
And she's one of those rare people where, the book cover matches the inside, right? She's the beautiful inside and out, and just, you're right, such a sweet lady, a born giver.
Well, as a fellow mama's boy,
true that.
It's true, and still to this day,
it takes one to know one, right, Chris?
Absolutely. But she still doesn't realize how many people love her. And, she, of course, up until COVID, she was still working 3 days a week at the bank, which was her favorite thing in the world.
And we miss her so much, because she would just brighten your day. You walk in there, and like you say, all smiles.
Smiles.
No matter how bad the weather outside, no matter how bad her back may be aching or whatever's going on in her life, she wasn't going to let that get her down. She would bring you up.
Absolutely. And I can't go anywhere today. I have even been on some bad scenes, and people would still walk up and ask how she's doing. And when they're at their worst, they would ask how she's doing. And it's not until we get out and I'll take her, we'll go eat lunch, or I'll take her to CVS where she loves to do her shopping. And I mean, she can't go anywhere without somebody walking up to her and recognizing her. And especially since COVID and the damage at her house after Ida, I think that's helped lift her spirits. So I'm realizing just how much she is loved by the community.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because it had to be crushing. I mean, COVID and the isolation that comes with that and the fear that comes when you're older and at risk, because I see it in my own parents who are close to your mom in age. It's really challenging. But man, this hurricane really whacked. I mean, y'all have a home in Strawberry Manor, this big mansion on Barringer Drive that is truly iconic, right? I mean, you can't not know that home. And here's your mom, who, as you mentioned, was so close with your father and, you know, so close with you and your family. But in her older years, she has this storm come through and just whack this place. And, you know, won't get into how she gets screwed over by insurance companies and whatnot. But how does she keep her spirits up through all that? Because, I mean, it just had to be, you know, like a knockout punch to her.
Well, you know, it's been a challenge for her. And, you know, and to be honest, we've never seen her like that. We've never seen her struggle so much. She's very independent.
Right.
Anything we do for her, she thinks that, you know, she's in the way, or she, you know, and she doesn't realize it's such a blessing to us. But she is ready to be home, and we don't blame her.
I bet. I bet.
She's ready to be home, and we're getting pretty close.
Good.
You know, thanks to your friend, attorney Mike Longgrass, who
he's great. Old law school buddy of mine. He knows that stuff inside and out.
Absolutely.
But it's just a shame that she had to do that, right? She's been paying that insurance company without question all this time. And it's when it's clearly time for them to step up, you know, they fall short. But,
you know, we've never had to
amazing
hire,
lady. She really is.
We've never had to hire a lawyer for anything.
Yeah.
You know, even 32 years of law enforcement and, you know, whether it be my dad, my mom, or anybody else, we've never had to hire an attorney. And so when we called you, we were desperate, and you pointed us in the right direction. And, you know, we're not asking for anything other than for them to do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, you just like you say, you want to get mom back in her house. But well, I'm glad to hear that. It sounds like you can see the light at the end of the tunnel if you're not quite there yet. And I know that will, you know, warm her heart because, you know, sincerely, she's one of the sweetest ladies in town.
Thank you.
But let's talk about your other parent. You know, I brought with me this photo that I brought out in past, you know, your old boss, J. Edward Layrisson, the old sheriff there in the middle.
One of my
right
heroes.
next to him, the famous Doc Gideon, mayor, along with a couple other former mayors and former state reps.
Great families in that picture.
Yep, boy, 5 great men right there in front of you. But let's talk about the one that raised you, because Doc Gideon was, you know, I really want to get into his career in chiropractic because he was a true trailblazer, a great doctor, a great businessman, and we will cover that. But first, let's talk about him as a mayor, because this is a guy who, frankly, just had a vision, and he made us the strawberry capital of the world, and he went and fought Hammond for the title, and, you know, just really made a difference to the point where even decades later, I think a lot of us think of your mom as the first lady because your dad was such a great mayor. And, you know, what was it like growing up in that household? And particularly, what was your dad like as a father?
Well, I mean, I couldn't be more blessed like you, Parker. I mean, same thing. You know, we're both blessed with wonderful mothers and fathers, and I couldn't be more blessed. Let me back up a minute about my dad, Parker, because a lot of people don't know this about him. But like your dad, my dad was brought up in an orphanage. And, you know, his first family abandoned him. So that was 2 families that abandoned him. And the next family was pretty rough. And, you know, I had a grandmother who was a warden at the jail. My grandpa Samp was a sheriff over in Fort Payne, Alabama. And he was busy busting, you know, moonshiners and whatever they were doing back in the day. But they were tough. And, you know, and so he went through a lot. And so like a lot of real men did back in those days, you know, I mean, he forged his date of birth and joined the Navy.
Whoa.
And,
Around here, we call that pulling a Bill Monteleon, you know?
Yeah.
Your old colleague, I think,
I
went in
love
at
it.
15 or
Absolutely.
16. So how old was your dad when he entered the service? That's amazing. That's so brave.
16.
Wow, 16. That is
16.
wild.
And he joined the Navy and became a Navy corpsman, a medic. And then he started boxing a little bit for the Navy. And right before they were about to deploy on a destroyer for the Korean War, my dad was in a bar. He had never had a drink in his life, but he used to like to go there and stir up people who may have had a little too much to drink and watch two other people get into a good old bar fight. So a man sat next to him and leaned over and said he'd been watching him in the boxing gym and offered him a way out of getting on that destroyer and going to the Korean War. But all he had to do was box. And I'll never forget, my dad said it took the guy about 10 minutes to say what he wanted to say because he had been a boxer for a long time and had a lot of head injuries. And his nose was about 2 inches over from where it was supposed to be. So he said, you know what, I'll take my chances in Korea. And they loaded up and went to Korea, where he spent 4 years as a medic on a destroyer.
Wow. What a brave man. So I'm sure, when a guy comes up that hard, both in the home life you described, the trials and tribulations of war, all the challenges inherent to that, it shapes the way he raises you guys. So, we kind of alluded to it earlier. You're not the only tough guy in your family. You've done your fair share of fighting cops like your grandfather and boxing people like your daddy, and lots more. But so have your brothers, Chief Tim Gideon, Kelly Gideon, the legendary detective and lawman of the Tangipahoa Sheriff's Office, who I saw the other night at the T-ball field. So it's kind of really cool. And he and Daddy just hit it off like it was 1995, man. They were back in it, both of them. I think it warmed their hearts to see each other.
Well,
but what was it like? And I know you've got sisters and others coming up through the house, but what was it like being a son of a man who came up that hard? I mean, what's that like? Because I kind of see the other end of the spectrum. My daddy had it easy. He worked hard, but he worked hard in a soda pop factory, drinking cola all day. So it was a little bit like being an Oompa Loompa for Willy Wonka.
I don't know about that.
Wasn't anything like the fog of war at 16. So tell us what that was like.
Well, I mean, we never heard about that when we were growing up. When I was growing up, I didn't know that until I got a little older. Something he never talked about, And he had a few tattoos on him, which surprised a lot of people that were back from that day and time and the war. And when I got a little older, and I'd see a tattoo peeking out on his leg or on his arm, or he's a very modest man. He didn't wear shorts. He was always in suit pants and shirt. People called him Mr. Clean around town. I remember Pete Hughes telling me those stories. And
God, talk about a great storyteller. Pete Hughes was the best.
The best. He could not. I saw him probably a couple of weeks before he got ill, and up until that day, he couldn't tell a story about my dad without crying real tears. He and I would be crying in a gas station or at a gas pump as he told those stories. But he
was such a big softy. But he loved your daddy deeply and truly.
He was a wonderful guy. But Parker, my dad was strict, and he needed to be, because we pushed the envelope. And I don't want to get too far into the storytelling on Tim, but Tim had made him mad enough that he needed to take my dad's El Camino and run off and join the Marine Corps. He chose the Marine Corps over coming home and facing the consequences from old Pops.
Wow.
So, I learned pretty early not to test him.
Sure. And you had the benefit of, it's like drafting in racing, right? You come behind these big brothers and you see them make a few mistakes along the way, and you try to avoid it.
100%. And he loved being a chiropractor. He loved helping people. He loved the city of Ponchatoula. He loved being a city councilman and later mayor for a couple of terms, and he loved it. And one of the things he loved the most was building up the downtown, getting businesses back in here. And I remember Sherman Ferris told me a long time ago in another Pete Hughes story, but my dad was going business to business when he was a councilman. And he was telling the businesses, if you vote for me and elect me, I promise you, we will fill up this downtown. No matter what I have to do to get it filled, we are going to make this a tourist attraction in South Louisiana. And I remember going to Gatlinburg for our family reunions on my dad's side, the Lebanese bunch, and the Zaydens. And my dad would always get a hotel. Wasn't the nicest, but it was a motel on the Gatlinburg Strip. And he would sit out on that balcony and he would just dream about what Ponchatoula could be like. And I remember that as a little boy. And I remember the conversations he tried to have with me about that, and he kind of wanted to replicate that here in Ponchatoula. And he worked very hard, along with a lot of other people.
Well, sure, it takes a village, and there were a ton of people responsible for that renovation downtown. Brian McMahon, who's been on the podcast, and Charlene Daniels, and Julian Dufresh, and all these guys that took the torch from your father and went on. But boy, if we ever had a Pied Piper to lead the charge, it was definitely your father. And it's neat. It's cool to hear you talk about your Lebanese family reunion, because growing up in Ponchatoula, I think you guys were the only Lebanese folks any of us knew. But later in life, you get to know that quote unquote Lebanese mafia. And I worked for the attorney general, who was part of the gang, and my brother Louis worked for a federal judge who was part of the gang. And you start to connect the dots, and it's really neat to see that part of your culture.
Carly Gonzalez and her family.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good friend of mine. Carly's great, but
they don't really have the unibrow, but like so my kids hate that part about it. But the old unibrow. It doesn't help you when you're at airports either, going through security. So.
Well, we're gonna get to security later, because you are a true security expert. And you have, to some extent trained up my team here, at least in basic pistol techniques. And we're hoping to get you back here for more safety. So I promise we're going to get into your legendary career in law enforcement and training and school safety. And you've done all these amazing things, including writing crisis plans for the state and whatnot. But before we do, I want to share a few more quotes here, because a few of your other friends have chimed in, our friends. Cherie Bassford said that Chris is the man. Sharon Miller says, thank you so much for sharing. This brightened her day so much, and it's such a sweet testimonial. That's sweet of you. Sharon's such a sweetheart, a whole high school friend of mine, a great person. And her brother is now my dad's and mom's next door neighbor. We love to see them fixing up an old family place. I think maybe my dad's great grandmother once lived in that house, and that was really neat. Speaking of old friends, Aggie Utley gets on here and says, love this family. And of course, yes, we share that. So, Chris, we're talking about your childhood, your mom, your dad. Before we move into other topics, let's talk about your siblings, because, not kidding earlier, your siblings are really beloved, whether it's kids that came up through Holly House in the daycare, or people that work for your brother as chief, or people who were touched by your other brother, your other sister. You have all these wonderful people, but why don't you just identify the gang a little bit and maybe give us some highlights of what you remember from your days as a kiddo with all these great brothers and sisters?
Sure. So there was Sherry and Donna and Holly were my three sisters, and then there was Kelly and Tim, obviously, and then Chucky, or Chuck. He doesn't like to be called Chucky anymore. I don't blame him, but he was named after my father. But Chucky's been going out since he left right after high school, maybe college, moved to Texas, and he does a lot of production stuff. Very successful guy. They're all amazing. I mean, I learned so much from all of them, all different personalities, which was good. And but overall, everybody got along, and I mean, not always, as siblings do.
My family's not as big as yours, but I know with just four boys, that's not possible. So with your big gang, no way. Yeah. But you're right. You come together at the end of the day, and
absolutely,
it all ends well. Maybe
absolutely. And they've been a big help. Always checking on my mom. Kelly was at the house the other day. measuring for blinds for her house. My mom is actually living with my sister Donna in Hammond right now, while her house is being worked on. And Donna and her husband have been, Danny Drago, have been a huge help. My sister Sherry, everybody's in contact. What can we do? How can we help? Tim, Kelly, Chuck, everybody. And I mean, you know, that's what family's all about. And, and it's good to see that work in hours when it, you know.
Well, and I know somewhere your dad's smiling down, seeing that, you know, knowing that you guys are supporting one another. So let's talk about the next chapters in your life. You know, or before we do, we're about to move into post-childhood, but let's move beyond the family. And if you will, tell us about some people that made an impact on you in your childhood years before you went into your career. These could be coaches, teachers, family friends, you name it. Friends of your own. It could be contemporaries in your class. But, you know, who do you remember from childhood that really made an impact on Chris Gideon?
Wow, there's so many. You know, Mr. and Mrs. Guidros from Villa West helped raise us, you know, and I mean, it's impossible for me to try to name them all, but you know, Coach Klein, an old football coach, happens to live next to my mom now, and
that's cool.
And I mean, look, back then we think they're tough and gruff and they're just trying to punish us, but when all they were doing was trying to build us as young men and to be you know, better people. And but you know, I mean, there were so many. My dad, your dad, all the old school guys that I got to meet as a young kid.
Yeah.
You know, all the political figures that were around, and to see how kind and how well everybody got along and how everybody came together. Excuse me. And you know, I mean, I was sitting back. I can remember sitting back watching that, thinking, "Wow, these are true friends." Whether they agreed or not on everything, you know, I didn't understand the politics of it, but you know, it wasn't like it is now. And again, you know, I don't do politics, but you know, it was a different time, like everything else. It was a different time. But you know, I can remember the first day of walking into then Chief John Dahmer's office when he was the chief deputy at the sheriff's office working for your dad, and I remember the speech he gave me. I remember the speech that your dad gave me, and I posted that on social media a year or two ago. I think it was on 30 or 31 years of being a commissioned law enforcement officer. And, you know, it was treat people fair. Treat people how you would want your family to be treated, regardless of how they're acting. You know, just do the right thing. Do the right thing.
Great advice.
And that's how he lived. That's how your dad lived. It's the kind of agency he ran. You know, when I got in 1989, Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office was the premier law enforcement agency within 5 or 6 parishes from here, for sure.
Wow.
You know, and I mean, it was all legends back then. And here I am, this young kid who had an opportunity to start out just as a reserve deputy, as a young man. And I mean, looking back on that, what a blessing it was to be able to learn from some of those legends like that.
Well, so let's talk about how you guys started, because you've named several legends, you know, from Pete Hughes to Dad to John Dahmer to all these guys. But, you know, you, as we talked about earlier, just like I wasn't the first lawyer in my family, you weren't the first police officer in yours. You know, what motivated you to go in that direction? Was it a grandfather having been in law enforcement as a sheriff? Was it a big brother? Was it a friend? Was it just a wild thought? I mean, you know, it takes a lot of courage, whether it's 2022 or 1989. What motivated? And you said reserves. So that meant you were going to go get shot at for free. What motivated you? I mean, not that getting paid isn't much better in law enforcement. They, you know, underpay everybody so much. But what motivated you, Chris, to go into that line of work?
Well, my 2 brothers, Tim and Kelly, you know, I mean, and their friends, they would come by the house, of course, eating lunch or dinner, whoever was riding with them, whatever deputies or whoever, somebody that was on the shift, Gerald Barron, Kermit Stewart.
Was Tim
He
chief yet, or were they both still
No,
out?
he was working for the sheriff's office for your
Okay.
dad.
Okay.
He and Kelly both were. And, I saw the camaraderie. Obviously, I didn't realize what I was getting myself into totally, but I didn't understand the process. But I knew that I wanted to be a law enforcement officer from at a young age. And like I said earlier, my dad was kind of elbowing me to go to chiropractic school, which, looking back on it, I probably should have. But let me tell you, I remember him telling me, just do what you love. And if you do what you love, you don't have to worry about the clock or what time you go home. And if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
Almost identical advice to what my dad told me and my brothers, and it works. You're right. It's great advice. So you catch that bug early, you follow your brothers to the sheriff's office. I know, look, in 1989, I'm a 12-year-old kid, so I'm paying zero attention to what's happening at Daddy's sheriff's office at that point, right? By the time I kind of get aware of the scene is when my friends go to work, basically for you up there,
Right.
when you're running the narcotics task force and all these now great community leaders, guys like Matt Digby and Herman Newell and, Artie Thompson and all these guys come up through the ranks and go to work at the sheriff's office. But what were those early years like? You started as a reserve, you mentioned, what was that like and where'd you go next?
Like drinking from the fire hose, just trying to take in all this information and trying to learn from some of these old pros. And of course, as a young man, you don't always appreciate the guarded approach, or, you just want to rush in and try to solve every problem. And of course, you don't know what you don't know, right? So, I had very little training at that point, a lot of get up and go. And so basically, they pretty much had to put a pinch collar on me sometimes and reel me back in. And I'm glad they did. Look, Parker, your dad has the patience of a saint. I've seen veins in his forehead when he gets mad at me that you probably haven't seen.
No, yeah, you've seen him curl up that tongue at that kind of. That's when you know it's about the.
I remember getting hit with a Marlboro cigarette back in the early '90s, or it might have been a pack of cigarettes.
Right.
But he had every right, and probably should have run me off just for just being this young guy who wasn't
full of fire.
Full of fire, not fully matured yet, ready to go. Whether it made sense or not, you could point in a direction and I would go. And that's not bravery, that's stupidity and immaturity and a lot of that stuff. And, if it wasn't for the patience of J. Edward Layrisson, he could have ended my career real early, but he didn't.
Well, I know he's glad he didn't, because you paid off that patience with some great leadership. And frankly, some of the toughest, tightest spots there are. Narcotics is among the most important and dangerous, aspects of law enforcement. And, you really shined. So, so thanks for turning the corner.
It felt a lot better once I started growing up and growing a brain and and two brain cells to rub together. My life got a lot easier.
That's funny. Well, what's it like? You mentioned earlier, over 30 years experience as a commissioned law enforcement officer. And in that time, you've gone from this kind of young hothead you just described to the proud papa who's seen his own son follow in your footsteps and become a police officer. What lessons do you pass on to Christopher? What's that like?
Well, I'm just as proud of him as I am, the other three. Christopher's 28 years old. He's been a law enforcement officer, obviously, working for your brother, Ponchatoula PD, for a couple of years. He's a lot more mature than I was at his age, or at least in my first couple of years of law enforcement. But, one of the things I told him is, Parker, don't forget how you felt when you were pulled over by a policeman on the side of the road. Don't forget the interactions that you had with policemen that you used to call me about and tell me about. And you deserved that stop, that encounter, but you didn't always like how you were treated. So don't be that kind of law enforcement officer. And I never had to tell him twice. I mean, look, was he, raring to go? Absolutely. But his maturity level was so much ahead of mine when I started. And, it takes time, I mean, it takes time. And Bree's been very patient with him. The supervisors up there, they're always offering them opportunities to learn and grow. And, but the main thing I told him is, I can't always tell you to be careful. Everybody, that, to be careful. You can't always choose what you get into. But most of all, people are going to remember the way you made them feel.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah.
And I think for the most part, based on some of the interactions and the people that I've had interactions with over the decades that tell me, oh, I got stopped by Christopher, or I had a run-in with Christopher. There was a call with Christopher. And I'm getting some pretty good feedback. So I'm super proud of him.
He's a fine young man. You and his mama and the whole team have done a great job there. And you mentioned you're equally proud of the other three.
Absolutely.
And you've got 4 amazing kids. Now, I'll admit it, I got a favorite because she's helped raise my boys. Shelby's my girl.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shelby, they are all incredibly talented. They are beautiful and handsome, and just talented and smart. So give us the rundown. Tell us about Caitlin.
Sure. So Shelby is, as you know, is 24. She's been out of nursing school. She's a registered nurse. She's been out about 1.5 years, 2 years. I'm super proud of her. She's working over at St. Tammany Hospital. She works in the delivery room. She's the
and I can testify she's great with babies because we put her, in charge of Luke when he was itsy bitsy, and she ran.
Absolutely, and she loves those boys.
She's got to be a natural.
She loves those boys. Great with kids. I mean, she just couldn't be more proud of her. Couldn't be more proud of her. We got Caitlin, that's 22. She's got about 1.5 years or so left in nursing school to be an RN, and she's at LSU down in
And
New
she
Orleans.
recently got the white coat, right? Didn't
She
that
did,
happen for her? That's a big day. That's
she
exciting.
did, and a pistol because of where she is down in New
I
Orleans.
bet. It's Lord knows she's well trained on it through her daddy. Now, does this mean she's no longer an LSU cheerleader? Is she focusing on her studies?
She couldn't do both. So she did 2 years as an LSU cheerleader,
Okay.
which is all she ever wanted to be growing up. And she grinded and worked really hard, made that team and enjoyed it. She said, it was the best couple of years of her life. She was cheering.
Yes. And what perfect timing, right? National championship,
right.
Joe
Undefeated,
Burrow, dream come true.
100%. But she had to choose. It was, you can either cheer or go to nursing school. Nursing school, and we learned from Shelby and everybody else we talked to, it's tough.
Oh,
they got a lot of work they have to do, and it never ends. So she made the tough choice. I think she made the right one. I know it wasn't easy, but she chose to go to nursing school, and so she's doing really well. And looking forward to her graduating and getting out of New Orleans. She's obviously living down there, and she can hear some gunshots every now and then. Her boyfriend's truck gets broken into every time she goes down. He goes to visit her. And so as a father, it's very unsettling. And so, we just continue to pray and hope everything works out. But they're all doing good. Byron, 16.
Yeah, let's talk about the slugger. He's been really fun to come up. I think he's like little Doc. It looks like he came out looking like your dad. He's such a neat kid. Tell us about Byron.
Yeah, super sweet person.
God bless that kid.
Like they all do. But Byron has loved baseball his whole life and really enjoys playing. He's been at St. Thomas the last 2 years, and you'll be happy to hear this, but he's transferring to Ponchatoula this year.
Way to go! So, yes, you made my day. That's great.
I know. His mom too. Right.
I bet.
And this is something you probably don't know, and he broke the news to us a couple of months ago, but he wants to be a chiropractor.
Really?
So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. That's exciting.
So super excited about
I
that.
bet. I
And
bet.
whether it does or doesn't, like I told
Yeah.
him, like my dad told me, just do something you love.
Yeah. Wow. That's so
Yeah.
exciting. What a great kid.
Super
Well,
blessed. Super blessed with all four of my
yeah.
children. Super proud of them.
Amen. Amen. Now look, we before we move on from family, I save, in my mind, the best for last. Let's talk about Laurie, because this is an incredible woman that I've known my whole life. I mean, when Bree and I were little bitty toddlers running around the beach at Seagrove while the family's on vacation, she's the one, putting sunscreen on us and, changing diapers, you name it. So wonderful woman. Gosh, she's got to be a great wife. But just tell us about Laurie.
Well, I'm married up, to say the least. And
Amen.
I'm
Makes
not
two
sure
of us.
what I did to deserve somebody as special as she is. But I'm super blessed. She takes care of us. She keeps it all together. She takes care of my mom like her own. It's just she keeps it all together. And how she does it, I don't know. I don't know. I tell everybody that I would be living under an overpass if it wasn't for Lauren. And I couldn't be
Nobody
more.
believes that about you, but you're right. At the same time, you're right about her. And it's a quality she's had her whole life, whether
Yeah.
it was as a teenager taking care of us little wild Layrisson boys and her cousins and everybody. Whether it was for 24 years being my dad's right hand at the sheriff's office and taking care of that, cast of characters y'all had going up there.
Yeah,
Or
that was
now
a
as an
handful.
adult, as a mama, the family y'all have going. You're right. I think Cherie says it best here. Laurie is a saint. Amen to that. That's a good.
Well, but and she is absolutely 100%. People that see her have no idea just how much she deals with on a daily basis, whether it be
Yeah.
our business, or like you talked about earlier with Bree's fundraiser, or when she was your dad's secretary. I mean, she is a multitasker master, and she
Yeah,
does it with
and
love.
such a high achiever. You mentioned Bree's golf tournament. I don't know the counts, but the year before Laurie took it over, we were having fun and we weren't losing money, but it was this little disorganized, fun, day. She takes it over. What was it last week, Chris? We went out there. Carter Plantation literally called Bree and Laurie and said, "Hey, got to stop signing up golfers. We've run out of room. We've never seen this many signs on the course." It's a huge success. People have a blast. It's financially successful. She just got that Midas touch, and I'm really happy for you that you married up, and happy for her that you guys have built such a wonderful family. And look, talk about a TPSO blast from the past. One of the great friends here, Cherry Landry, says she's a great friend and she loves her. We love you too. Long time
We
no
do
see.
love you, Cherry. We
Cherry, I hope
love
you
you. We
must be
miss you.
doing well. We miss you. Go by and see my mom and dad. They would love to see you sometime. They think the world of you. So, folks, we're here with Chris Gideon. We've been talking about family, his early years, career in law enforcement. Soon we're going to start talking about the business that he now runs. But before we get to that, Chris, you're a modest guy. You don't like tooting your own horn. So, when I ask you about your TPSO days, you talk about how patient my dad was and, early indiscretions, and that's all well and good. But I'm not going to let you get off this show without sharing with us some of your many big successes, because you ran a super successful narcotics, task force, and you did all this great stuff. Eventually the state attorney general would tap you to write the crisis response plan for the, the state that's been implemented all over by the FBI and private sector and whatnot. So why don't you just give us, a little bit of a highlight reel or tell us some stories about your success in law enforcement before you transition into private. I mean, I know you still do law enforcement too, but you also have private business. But, starting with TPSO and moving into other projects, tell us about some of the places you've gone, things you've done, and so on. Let's put the modesty aside, and you don't have to brag. I'll do the bragging for you, but at least tell us a little bit about, some of the things you've done.
Well, back in the day, Parker, when you started at the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office, you had to work every division. So there was 60 or 100 hours in the radio room, 60 or 100 hours in the jail, 60 or 100 hours in every division that most people wouldn't believe if you told them that. And that helped. It helped give us an understanding of how important a dispatcher is when they're taking calls and trying to keep up with, us out on the road doing this. And whether you're a patrol officer or specialized division, everybody thinks that what they have going on is the most important thing at the time. And you have these one or two dispatchers sitting there just managing it all. And you never know how busy they are unless you actually spend time. So that's something that Sheriff Layrisson did, that while you're going through it, until you realize what you're seeing, you think, man, I got to get through this and get to where my assignment is. But looking back on it, and even while we were there, just to see how amazing those dispatchers are, with them taking in all these calls and keeping up with everybody, just to see
I'm
how.
so glad you mentioned that, because these are unsung heroes in law enforcement.
100%.
They are incredible.
100%. And the corrections officers, what they deal with.
You talk about the toughest job for the lowest pay and the least appreciation ever. That checks all the boxes, but it's essential to our society.
Yeah, and it's essential for young officers to see what goes on in there, so you have some idea of what they go through, and in the long run, it makes you more patient. So when somebody calls the jail and I need to pull so and so out, and if that takes 30 minutes, just because you're a detective wearing a tie and some shiny shoes doesn't mean that the task they're already doing isn't just as important or more important than what you're asking for. So it breeds that patience and understanding, just like the radio room, that was invaluable, as a young law enforcement officer looking back on it. So, after that, I did a little in patrol, and then I was fortunate enough to be assigned to the Tri-Parish Narcotics Task Force. Whether I was ready for that yet or not, I'm not sure, but your dad gave me the opportunity. And, back then there wasn't a lot of technology. So things were done a lot different then. So there might be two of us out here buying drugs with no cover teams or anything. And that's just the way things were done. But, it forces you to learn a lot faster. It forces you into situations that you have to learn how to navigate, how to talk to people, how to keep yourself out of trouble. So I learned a lot as a young narcotics officer. And then I was transferred into the detective division at the sheriff's office, but primarily working narcotics investigations. And, they're all.
And at that time, was your brother Kelly in detectives, or was he elsewhere in the department?
I think he was still in patrol, but not long after came into detectives. Okay. Yeah.
Well, now, were y'all able to collaborate much, or were you off on kind of Narcotics Island?
No,
that might have been pretty cool working.
There's some major cases that we were able to obtain confessions on. We were excellent together as a team. I mean,
that's cool.
And we were interrogating suspects, whether it be for homicide or burglary, kidnapping, rape, whatever, misdemeanor theft. It didn't matter. We had that chemistry in the interrogation room right off the bat. And that's
because with brothers, it's almost telepathy, right? I mean, he can see where you're going in a way that a 20-year partner may not get, because that had to be really cool, man. You guys just like Jordan and Pippen, just kind of knowing. And I want to, speaking of the good old days of TPSO, the Thomas family, Miss Jackie Thomas says good interview.
Hey, Miss Jackie.
Hey, Miss Jackie. Amen to that. I agree. So this is cool. So at this point, you're working in detectives with a focus on narcotics, but working all kinds of cases. You mentioned rape and murder and all this, getting to work with your brother. Tell us more about that.
Well, it was just a time where I was kind of forced to step up and learn a lot faster. But you have to understand, I had people like Chippy Fitz, Chester Pritchett, Bill Montleon, Mark
Yeah.
Alperson, Kerry Dangerfield,
Yeah.
who was a huge idol of mine. I learned so much from Kerry. It's
This
unbelievable.
is like the 1927 Yankees
Yes.
of crime fighters and
Right.
detectives and I mean, you're talking about guys that are in, Chester's cage, like a literal genius, and
Yes.
Dangerfield was a 5-tool prospect,
Right.
that's a guy who could do it all.
100%.
And
I
all of
mean,
those guys, man.
he was just
Yeah.
a huge figure to me. When Kerry
Yeah.
Dangerfield pulled up on the scene in this old black Chevy Blazer with tinted windows and stepped out, whether he had a shotgun or a cold drink in his hand, he was just this humongous figure to me. And the way he was able to talk to people, and people felt really good about talking to him and giving him information. I was so impressed with that, and I tried to mimic and learn everything I could from him. And I remember picking his brain for hours at night, and he would just sit there until I got done. He never once told me, Chris, I'm ready to go home. And he probably should have. And I'll tell you another one, Mark Camilo.
Oh, yeah. Another great one for
Mark,
sure.
I worked with Mark and Major Dangerfield at night. There was a 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. shift, and we worked together for several years. And, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from them. I learned a lot from Kelly, Jerry McDowell, poor Miss Nancy Bankston. She was the one that held it all together for us. Kept us all squared away like Carol K. Morris did at narcotics. Miss Nancy was keeping us straight in detectives.
She ran a good office there at the substation for you. I remember it well.
Yeah. So, I'm just pulled from, I mean, how could you not learn something from this team, right?
Yeah, because all these great guys, but they all had their own style,
Yes.
It's like, Bill Montleon's son, Britt's one of my best friends. So I've seen him the most out of all that gang over the years, and you hear all these war stories, and they're just amazing. But it's such a different approach than, say, like the analytical mind of a Chester Pritchett or the Jerry McDowell, very different approach. I mean, all these different, and you're sitting there as kind of the young guy of the group, soaking it in. But you had the smarts too. I mean, a lot of young guys are like, "Hey, I get off at 1, the bars are still open. Let me get out of here. I gotta, how would I make?" But you're sitting there, basically soaking up everything a legend like Kerry Dangerfield will share, and that's really neat. Miss Jackie's back, and she says that you are her friend, Chris, and you've been like family to her all her life, and she had the chance to work with you at PPD, and I know she appreciates that. So, Miss Jackie, thank you for sharing that. Our good friend Trisha Nicholas says, "Hey, friend, where's that beautiful wife? Great interview."
She's at home.
She's probably at home. She's probably saying, "Parker, I thought you told me you get Chris out of here by 6. Hurry up." So
she's critiquing my every move.
2 more minutes.
Well,
let's do this, Chris. Let's talk about this next chapter, because I love what you're doing now, because, you've had this career protecting the community, doing all these great things, whether it was through Tri-Parish or the Detectives Bureau or, Ponchatoula Police Department, patrol, all these things. But now, in addition to all that, you've taken on roles in consulting and training. And, I kind of alluded to earlier this crisis response plan that you did, where you're, doing things to try to keep schools safe. And so can we talk about that? And then eventually we'll get into the courses you're teaching and all the things you can do to help people with personal safety. But I mean, we're not here to talk politics, and we won't, but we are here to talk about things that can help people in Ponchatoula stay safer. And we would be naive to ignore the fact that we've had a number of shootings around here, from the Strawberry Festival to the Hammond High graduation, et cetera. And people are nervous. They want to, stay safe. And in you, we have a local resource that's frankly nationally respected in that realm, and have given it a lot of thought, time, energy. So, let's go back to the days when the Attorney General rings you up and says, "Hey, I want you to write this plan," and just tell us about how you got started on that path to consult in safety and protection and all those issues.
Well, I was already teaching some situational awareness classes and some concealed carry classes and things like that. And Parker, one of the passions of mine has always been, when we finish interviewing a suspect, whether it be for stealing somebody's weed eater up to multiple homicides or robbery. Pick the crime. One of the things I've always liked to do is buy them a pack of cigarettes and a Whopper combo and say, look, we're done. So can I ask you a few questions? You know, we'll feed you. Could you just let us pick your brain a few minutes? And 99% of the time they say yeah. And so the questions that I've always been interested in is why that person, why that place, and why that time? And could that person have done anything different to make you either not victimize them that day or pick somebody else, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean our job as a hard target is
because you're thinking forward to prevention and how you can use these lessons to help future people, right?
Right. And they all say the same thing. They let me get too close. They weren't paying attention. They were on their cell phone. They didn't lock their door. They answered the door instead of talking to me through the door. You know, they sat in their vehicle too long and weren't paying attention and let me slip up on them. I mean, you know, so basically it all boils down to mindset and teaching people how to be better thinkers. You see our gun classes, Parker, a lot of people come there in the morning and they're all worked up and they're nervous and they think we're going to get right into these gun handling and just start shooting and touching guns. And then the first break they ask, hey, when are we going to touch the gun? Second break, hey, when are we going to touch the gun? And I mean, y'all have taken my class. You know that's the last thing.
It's fun, but guys, you put your time in. It's at the end of the day.
But I mean, you know, that's because the firearm is the last piece to the puzzle, right?
Of course.
So we can't make anybody a tactician in one day. We can't, you know, make you a SWAT team member. If you weren't a ninja when you got there, you're not going to be a ninja when you leave. but what we can do is make you a better thinker.
Right.
So what I tell people is, you know, the only guaranteed way to win a fight is to avoid it. That's the only way, right? So it's the places and things that we don't allow ourselves to get into because of early indicators, pre-attack indicators, certain behaviors that just don't fit. Yeah, can it be disheartening to plan a movie date or you know, pick your outing and you need to remove yourself and your family because something's just not right? But it's better than letting it play out and then it turning into a tragedy. So that early indication and utilizing what's coming out of the bad guy's mouth and how they think has enabled us as a team. When I say team, let me just tell you, I'm the talking head of the team, basically. The real heart of it are people like Laurie that take the calls, Cherie, Flint, TJ, Yasmin, Aggie, a lot of the people that are on here right now who have been, and I know I'm leaving some out, but the crew that I have is second to none. Not only at the range where safety it counts, but in the classroom and helping people get past this. So, you know, they've heard me say these things hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. But the main thing, Parker, is teaching people to be a better thinker, whether it be about gun safety or their own personal safety, and how to apply it inside and outside the home or wherever you are on the planet.
Well, and that was a big pleasant surprise for me because, as you'll recall, in the same room you're interviewing in now, you were kind enough to come in and take my whole team here at the law firm and teach us a basic pistol course. And I thought it was going to be just that, just basic pistol safety, you know, the kind of stuff that my dad taught me and my brothers growing up, but that I wasn't certified in and that I knew my teammates who were interested in getting some pistols, you know, could use. But it was so much more. I mean, we walked out of that 8-hour class with a wealth of knowledge about situational awareness, personal safety, and really not just the facts of if this happens, do that, but a mindset on how to think going into each situation and how to analyze it. And I got to say, you're a gifted teacher because, you know, these concepts are super important. And it's really easy as we sit here today on the tail of all these horrific shootings. And I mean, that's just on the mind of everybody this week, right? But life's going to go back to normal, and there will be gaps between this shooting and the next, and it won't be top of mind perhaps, but you tell these great stories that keep it entertaining. And I mean, it's just, let's face it, Jesus used parables to teach things to people, because the great story has always worked as a hook to try to implant lessons and wisdom in people. And you got a real gift for it, man. I got to commend you. Is that something that is just natural to you? Have you always been that way growing up? Is it something you intentionally go and plan to do? Did you learn it from your daddy? I mean, where's that come from?
Parker, I was given the opportunity to become a CPR instructor as a young policeman. And I was a nervous wreck. The first time I spoke to a bunch of cops about CPR, I was a nervous wreck. I felt out of my element. It just took me a little time. My dad just would tell me and said, look, just do your homework, get up and talk about what you know, but be prepared to answer the tough questions. So I took that to heart, and I didn't go back for any more instructor training until I got a little bit older, and I ended up going to defensive tactics school for the sheriff's office and use of force post-certified instructor, where I taught at the Hammond Training Center and LSU Basic, and then later at Slidell Regional Public Safety Academy. And it was just something I was passionate about. And once I started teaching something that I was passionate about, I think it started to flow a little better, and it started to make more sense to me. And I think it made more sense to my students. But I'm not going to tell you that there's not a little stage fright involved. When you take me out of my comfort zone, the first couple of minutes, it takes me a minute or two to adjust.
Yeah. Well, look, I've been blessed to study under some of the greatest trial lawyers in Louisiana. And I had lunch with one of my great trial lawyer mentors a week ago, Ed Walters. He's better at this than anybody. And they'll tell you, man, if you're not nervous, you don't care enough, right? I mean, when they might be their 300th jury they're in front of, but you get that little edge. It's a good thing. Well, absolutely. Let's talk about, the issue of safety and what resources may be out there for people, because I know you're not a guy who's into plugging things, and I'm going to have to pull teeth out of you just to get you to share the information on how we can hire you or your team to teach a course, to take a course. But, aside from that, are there free resources out there? Are there places you'd recommend? I mean, because here's the thing, in this day and age, there's a lot of misinformation in the world. I don't want people jumping on YouTube and looking at some Yahoo who doesn't know what he's talking about. Tell us where we can learn the important stuff.
Well, you always want to seek training from a reputable instructor, right? You might not agree with everything that instructor or that instructor cadre says, but that's part of learning. You can train under 15 or 50 different instructors, and you take what you want, some of what you like and don't like, and create your own. But there's a lot of resources out there, Parker. In 2011, I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, General Fody, Sheriff Fody, as I remember him.
Yeah.
But through Tracy Dahmer Ferris reached out to me, and I was contracted with them a little bit to do some domestic violence training for them. And it kind of got rerouted to school crisis planning. So there was an old plan for the state that the AG's office had around, and they
that the old Sandra Ezel plan. That's when I used to share an office with her at the AG's office.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah,
and a lot of it wasn't wrong. It just wasn't updated, right?
Yeah, right, so, right.
These plans, any safety or security plan has to be a living document, and it needs to be updated regularly when new information comes out. So while I was in the process, and look, Tracy and the AG's office was wonderful. They said, look, anybody you want to talk to, you go talk to them. And so at the time, Columbine was the thing. So I'd reached out to a couple of people from there and asked them what went right, what went wrong. And that was in 2011. And the next thing I did was reach out. You know what they say, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I reached out to a guy named Lester Millette, and he's from the Port of South Louisiana. He's well known for writing crisis reentry plans for the state of Louisiana and a lot of other programs. He was a member of InfraGuard at the time, which is a private-public partnership with the FBI, partnering up with private industry to help protect critical infrastructure in the United States. So they had teams for cyber threats, for maritime threats, oil and gas threats. They didn't have a school crisis division, so to speak. And so Lester and I got together. Lester spearheaded most of it and put it into black and white for me. And we got this plan together and got it approved. And then Lester submitted it to InfraGard, Louisiana. Now, if you want more information on that, you can go to infragard-la.gov. And on that site is that multi-hazard school safety initiative written by Lester. Now, once you go on there, you'll see resources. Click on that and click down and see that. It's probably 50 or 60, 70 pages long, maybe a little bit longer than that.
That sounds like
but it's updated every couple of years. And so that's some free resources to get out there. There's literally checklists for how to conduct school surveys, safety surveys, security assessments, things like that. But during that time in 2012, we were still working on it, and Sandy Hook happened.
Oh, goodness.
And so it was such a tragedy, and we were hearing, that they had done a lot of things right. So we started reaching out a little bit and found out that Sandy Hook was one of those places that took it very serious. They had plans that they rehearsed regularly. The whole school was locked down all the time. There was no gates or doors or anything unlocked. And the suspect killed his mother at home, went to the school, shot his way into the front door, and killed 20 children and 6 school employees, including a couple of teachers.
So you're able to talk directly to the people at Sandy Hook, the people at Columbine, the people involved in the actual incidents and follow-ups. What a wealth of resources. I mean, these are the incidents of the time, and I'm sure you just learned a ton.
Well, and it's not about Monday morning quarterbacking. It was a blessing to be able to have access to those people because, if we don't learn from these things, then we can't improve on them, right? So it was never about criticizing what happened or anything. It was just how do we learn and how do we build off of this? What could we have done better? What could they have done better, possibly? And what we found in Sandy Hook was the same thing everybody found at Sandy Hook is, short of putting bank glass on the front of the school, he shot his way into the front door.
Yeah.
But, teachers I don't have to tell you this, Parker. Teachers are amazing people.
Oh, for sure.
And one of the things that they did besides their physical security very, very well is the parents and the school system allowed the teachers, to have talks with the children. Now we're talking about 7, 8, 9-year-olds, right? And there was nothing traumatizing about it. They just said, because look, who do our kids trust as much or almost as much? The only people on the planet that they trust as much as they trust us are their teachers.
Right.
And they respect them and they listen to them. So especially the really young ones. So what we learned is that they told their students, if you ever hear loud noises, things like that, if I ever do this and lead you into another room, everybody be quiet and just know, I promise you we'll come back for you. I just need you all to be quiet. And that's exactly what happened to a lot of classrooms there. Their teachers led them away to a safe place. In fact, one of the young teachers, when she locked these kids into this closet with nowhere else to take them but there, turns around, sees the shooter coming down the hall, and leads the shooter back into her classroom. And it wasn't until he got in there that he realized that she had taken him away from the students and not to the students, and he killed her. So, listen,
real
I don't think, and in all of my research and training, and just from having kids in school, our teachers are willing to die for their students. Their number one priority is for those kids to get home safe, right? So it's a multi-lane, multi-layered plan, and security is done in layers. These plans have to be multi-layered. they have to include the students, no matter how young. They have to include the staff. They have to include the school board. They have to include local law enforcement and fire and rescue, EMS, local hospitals. I mean, all of this planning can be done, but within every scenario is a million scenarios, right? But what it does is it starts to make people think. And what are our options? What are our options if, we have a school close to a railroad track, which we have here in Ponchatoula? What if we have a chemical spill? What's the protocol? What's the protocol if there's a fire, which is practiced all the time? What about active shooter? What about unknown subject on campus? That kind of stuff, So
these are really just examples of what you said earlier. It's situational awareness, right? This is the situation. This school is close to the tracks. This one's not. We've got different potential issues and different plans. And
I mean, it could be a pursuit, of an armed robbery suspect who just flees into the school. So, I mean, there's a million scenarios, but they have to be thought about. They have to be talked about. And most of all, that we have to admit that it can happen here, not just here, but everywhere. It can happen here. Once people realize and accept the fact that it can happen here, things can happen.
Well, and I'll tell you how that hits home for me to provide an example, especially for frequent watchers of our show. Sadly, one of our former guests lost a family member in the recent shooting in Texas. Dr. Gildner, Crystal Gildner, one of our beloved, local residents. Sadly, her sister's grandchild was killed. And so, folks, if you're watching, and hopefully we can get a link, in the comments below, I know that family would welcome support. And that's not why I bring it up, but I know they need it for funeral costs and more. But my point here is it's one thing to see Fox News or CNN or whatever news you get and hear about a shooting in another state and dismiss it and think of it as it couldn't happen. But these are people relatives that died in some instances, right? And I'm talking to her husband today, Billy Gildner, Coach Gildner out at Champ Cooper. Great local coach. I think he's been the runner-up in basketball 2 years in a row. Great guy. I've known him my whole life. He's my little brother's buddy. But even though he's lost a family member here, he's talking about how complicated it is. He realizes it's a tough solution. And I think teachers are frustrated to hear Monday morning quarterbacks chime in, maybe know-it-all lawyers like me about we need to do this, this, and this. And as Coach Gildner told me, those guys have never substitute taught a day in their life. They've never worked a shift as a police officer. It's like we got to see these agencies you're talking about come together. And the people who really know what's going on team up, It's too often it's these loudmouth politicians and whatnot trying to tell everybody what to do. And how do you know if you haven't been in a school before,
Well, that's true, Parker. There again, one of those layers is the public, right? Is early reporting this to law enforcement, so it gives law enforcement time to react. And I'm not blaming the public. This is just one of the layers, right? It gives them time to lock the school down.
That's a great point.
So it's not just a law enforcement problem. It's not just a school problem. It's not just an SRO problem. There's several layers of problems that people need to come together and go, what can we do? How can we help? And look, you're going to be possibly wrong. And who knows if you're wrong or not. If the shooting is prevented or stopped, some people would say, oh, well, it wasn't going to happen anyway. But we don't know. The only people that know are the law enforcement officers and the people that have the direct information when they act on it. So, and they don't like to put that out a lot because they want people to be able to call in, whether it be Crime Stoppers, 911, and understand you're going to be protected. We're not just going to hang you out there. We need that information. If you think somebody is a threat to your school or your church or your workplace or your family or your home, you have to reach out and get that ball rolling so that the resources that are out there can be put into place.
That's a great point. And, we've seen that. We've seen that work here recently, and we don't know what would have happened, but just this week, your department, Ponchatoula Police, got 2 guys off the street that were stacked with drugs and guns, and weren't they pointing the guns at people? But these weren't just a couple of Glocks. These were Glocks with, you know, big old magazines,
45 round magazines,
45 round, 30 round. I mean, you know, they could do a ton of damage. And thankfully, we had public, concerned citizens, you know, team up with law enforcement to kind of get the word out. Seems like everybody did a great job, and these guns and these drugs and these bad guys are off the street. But
they did, Parker. But let me tell you, and I'll tell everybody this. You know, the good thing about living inside the city limits of Ponchatoula, and frankly, Hammond too. Hammond's doing a great job with this. Is they can get 1, 2, 3 policemen to you wherever you are in the city in under 3 minutes. Now, that's a great response time. I tell a lot of people, you know, a minute and a half. That's just giving them an extra minute. It's more like a minute and a half or 2 minutes. But until that help gets there, you are your own first responder.
Great
right?
point.
So we have to keep ourselves alive and out of trouble and out of danger, and our families, until law enforcement can get there. And that's not all solved with the gun.
Well, let's talk about how we can help people do that. You've given us free resources through the state, but let's talk about your company and the training you do, because you've got in me somebody who's, you know, paid good money and gotten the product, and I'm here to endorse it, to tell you it was worth every dollar I spent. It was worth a full 8-hour day. And I know all the members of my team felt the same way. You know, we came back to work and said, that was great. You know, so tell us about how we can find you, how we can book you, how we can get in touch, because you offer a number of courses, a number of services, and hopefully you'll share some of that with us. But please, we've only got a few minutes here left. Sure. Tell us a little bit about the good work you're doing.
Well, so again, we got a great team. We offer concealed carry classes. We offer situational awareness classes, which is a non-shooting class, about a 3-hour class that is really appropriate for ages 8, 9, 10, maybe 11 and up to adults. And those have been pretty good. I think recently we've had a lot more. And that's just the thinker class, right? To make you realize how long it takes you to get in your car once you see a threat. Some of the things that people might not think about. Pre-attack indicators, like get out of the phone, right?
Yeah, right.
That's a humongous problem that people are getting out of their cars, looking at the phones and walking into these places.
Yeah, screen time is more dangerous than people think. Screen time can get you killed in a parking lot. Absolutely. That's a great point.
Right. Or, you know, just looking at the screen, you open the door and everybody in there has got their hands up. You had an opportunity not to walk in there at all had you just been looking to make sure people are behaving normally inside before you go in. So we do offer those classes, again, the concealed carry classes. Now, you know, we offer school safety, church safety assessments where we can come just do an assessment. We can help you create a plan. We can, you know, help with the medical side, which I'll get to in a minute. But you know, we try to cover, and we've done some of all that, right? But the main thing we need is the buy-in from the public and the support of the school systems, and I think they're pretty much ready. You know, inside that same company, Hard Target Training Consulting is the training aspect of our company. I have a private investigations agency called ASAP Team, Advanced Surveillance, Advanced Protection. And
so, Chris, I put a link here in the comments, which I'm posting here at the bottom of the screen for our viewers, where folks can go in our comments, click, and it will take them through to the Hard Target Facebook page. And there they've got your phone number, other contact information, and they can reach you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want you to be aware we've got a link there for people to find you.
So through the private investigations agency, ASAP Team, I mean, obviously we offer general investigations, that kind of stuff. But we also offer detection dogs to the private industry, both narcotics and explosives detection dogs. So, and that includes firearms and all that in the explosive dogs. Whether it be a school, whether it be a business, a ship, I mean, rehab facilities, we work all over the place, as far away as Florida. But one of the main things that we offer that I think people are not really aware of is that we can come to your home. If you suspect that someone in your home is bringing illegal narcotics into your home, that can be really hard to find.
Yeah.
But not for a good drug dog, right?
That's a great point. Never thought about using that in a private context, but that would be cool.
Yeah, and
Tell me this. I didn't know you guys worked all the way in Florida. Do y'all hit the beach? Because if you do, Laurie's got to let you get a red Ferrari for, the Magnum PI 2022.
With Apollo sticking out of the top.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I could get in the Ferrari. I just don't think I could get out of it.
I
don't think I could. I'd have to roll out of it. But yeah, there is a beach actually on one of the spots that we go over and work in Florida.
Really?
It's on the beach.
That's cool.
So, but a lot of people don't know that kind of service is available to people.
Yeah.
Right. So they spend a lot of time looking for some narcotics that they suspect. Maybe it's in a vehicle, maybe it's in their home, maybe it's on the property somewhere. But that's places that we can come and assist families. And we're not there in a law enforcement capacity. We're there to service you. We're not there to get your children in trouble. We don't do the searching. We just tell you where the dog alerts. What you find, you can choose how to handle that with, keep it in the family, get law enforcement, get help.
It's substance abuse, so common, such a big deal. That's a great service. Look, I could keep you here all night, and Brandy and Laurie would be really mad at both of us. Yeah. So forgive me for keeping you longer than an hour. But before we go, is there anything we haven't covered that's on your mind, on your heart, anything at all you want to share with our viewers or talk about?
Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity and for inviting me on. I really appreciate it. If we could ever do anything, obviously for interview viewers, just have them reach out to me. This is the thing I want to talk about right now is something that my cadre of instructors and range safety officers call when I get on my soapbox. And I'm gonna keep this short.
Go for it.
But the most overlooked part of people's personal safety is knowing how to treat preventable blood loss, preventable death due to blood loss, right?
Right.
So one of the leading causes of preventable death, both in the battlefields and studies for over 20 years of war on the battlefield, the studies coming back, and here in the United States and all around the world, is one of the leading causes of preventable death is critical blood loss. Mm-hmm. So, look, it's not my lane. It's not something I teach, but for the past 5 or 6 years, I've been super passionate about it because I know how far away we were from help a lot of times. When you puncture an artery, a femoral artery in your leg or in your neck, you have 1 to 3 minutes from the time you start bleeding, not 1 to 3 minutes from the time that, the help gets there.
Yeah, right.
So, not only is it important for individuals and families, and, there's free Stop the Bleed classes that happen all over the country. You can look those up online and do a 2-3 hour class. It's an introduction to Stop the Bleed. And we're going to be offering some other classes soon, which is more of a trauma casualty care class, a 1-day class that comes with a 4-year national certification. We're going to be offering that soon. I've partnered up with some real experts. And but most of all, these kits not only need to be in your vehicle, but they need to be in every classroom in the United States.
Yeah. So where could we get a kit like that? You don't want us just hopping on Amazon and buying any old crap.
The problem.
How do you find a credible vendor for something like that?
That's been a major problem is trying to find one with the right, with everything you need in it to treat critical blood loss. So I'm teaming up with a company owned by Brian Martin called Resta, and he's going to be building these kits and selling them. So if you like a kit, you can reach out to us on Facebook. There's different levels of the kit, different sizes, whether it be for a classroom, a vehicle, an individual first aid or trauma kit.
No, but you're right. We need one of those here in this law office, but I wouldn't know where to get it. And I'm so glad you're bringing that to, because you're right. It's hard for us to have the right awareness all the time. There's so many messages and there's so many things going on. But the story of my dad nearly dying with his heart failure and his and needing a defibrillator, and AEDs are a really big deal. And we've got one now in this office. They're not cheap. You need to get trained on them, But, you know, had that not happened to my dad, I might not be aware of that problem. But it's an important way to save a life. And this kit you're showing is the same thing. I mean, when you think about the timeline you've got for critical blood loss, I mean, like you said earlier, maybe you get somebody in a minute and a half if you live in town. But if you live in Beatico or Pumpkin Center, no way. So if you don't do it yourself, somebody's bleeding out. So, you know, it
and
takes
again, it's preventable
like
death.
novice like me know this is the real issue. You know, you don't want to bleed out in the field before Acadian can get there.
Well, I mean, you know, you're much more likely to need a kit like this or part of a kit like this than you are to use a gun. And I teach firearms training. It's very important, but we need to think about what's most likely and what's important now. And what's important now is, what if you can save, you know, a child from a vehicle crash on the side of the road? What if it's your vehicle? How far away from you when you're in a boat on the water from help, if you're bleeding to death or have a traumatic head injury to open up airways? You know, every time I think about this, I think of Sheriff Layrisson being at that farm and chainsaws flying and you know, but I mean, you know, what about hunting camps? How far are you away from helping a hunting camp?
We've seen Dad cut each of his knees with chainsaws over the years. So you're spot on, and that's a perfect example.
But it's super important, and I think it's something that needs to because it's not the sexy part of personal protection.
I can relate, because practice and law is kind of similar, and I bet medicine is the same way. You know, the only part of the law that people show on TV typically are trials. It's the exciting part, right?
Right.
Police officers, it's the car chase, right? You know, and so my point here is, you know, and gunfights, of course. So it's like the gun's the sexy part that makes for good drama and exciting movies and TV, but it's a last resort. In the law, most cases are won early on at some boring stage, maybe in a deposition or a well-written pleading or something. You know, only 1% of cases ever see the courtroom in a trial. So training up on these early intervention, it's smart and here, you know, necessary to save lives. So, Chris, I thank you for your time. This has been one of our best interviews ever. You know, you lived up to the hype, man. I gave you a big intro. Actually, folks, I gave Chris 2 big intros. You should have seen the first one before we went live, when we were just talking to each other one-on-one. But yeah, I meant every word I said, man. You're a great guy from a great family. And I'm so glad that you married Laurie and kind of, you know, joined our family. And thank you for your time. And to our viewers, thanks for sticking with us all this time. We will see you here next week. Take care.
All right, man. Love you, Parker.
You too, brother.